Okay, we're at the Catholic Men's Conference, and I'm here with Victoria, and Victoria is going to read her testimony. And because this is a thoroughly modern age, she's got her testimony on her smartphone. So we're going to hear her testimony, and then we're going to talk a little about it. Victoria, the floor is yours. Read away.
This is my testimony entitled Brokenhearted that I gave on the Supreme Court steps at the March for Life in January 2015. And this is what I said. I had an abortion because I was drowned in shame. I was 17. The actual date blotted from my memory. November 1973. Roe versus Wade had passed in the beginning of that year. That new law sanctioning abortion was implanted within my disgraced, teenaged mind. Tragically, Roe versus Wade had legitimized a so-called solution to my dire dilemma. Somewhere, unreachable and buried, I saw that this was wrong. Riding in a Buick LeSabre with my mother driving me to the clinic, I was hysterical. For the entire fathomless trip, I cried uncontrollably. During the procedure, I felt dead. Everything was meaningless, a lie, shattered. I felt eternally damned, scrapped, broken-hearted. I was nothing, vacuumed outside of myself, and left. Silenced. Afterward, I wore my abortion number, branded, forevermore, invisible, rendered mute. I felt life-sentenced. It was a crime to be alive. That wove me into this tangled, ghastly path. Diagnosis, major depression with suicide ideation. This was my life, in and out of utter despair. I struggled with failed relationships, lost jobs, and lost homes. I lived in crises, financial, domestic violence, abuse, alienation from my family, and my storybook, St. Valentine's Day marriage, failed, nearly murderous. Ravaged, I cried out to God. He heard me from his holy hill. Mary placed her mantle of protection over me. I found true healing through countless anointed priests. Clinging to my pearl rosary, I was led to Rachel's retreat, Project Rachel. Captured in alabaster jars was every one of my endless tears, like Rachel's, whose children are no more. And in July 2013, I was received into the Catholic Church at Our Lady of Victories. Once those tears had drowned me in shame, now I drown in Jesus' fathomless ocean of divine mercy and forgiveness. I was given a gift, a pearl rosary, blessed by Pope Francis at the canonization of St. John Paul II. I touched Jesus' hymns, a revolution, and he healed me. The prophet Isaiah proclaims, "Wear a garment of praise, not despair." And Psalm 30 rings out, "To the end that my heart may sing thy praises and not be silent." And that is why I am silent no more.
Victoria, that was even said a year after the fact. That's incredible testimony, and I'm reminded of it by something my priest once said, my pastor years ago, who told me that abortion is the abandonment of hope. It's saying that you cannot. And now I see you today. You're at the Catholic Men's Conference. You're passing out flyers and so forth. This prayer, the prayer of divine mercy, to people who are here to attend. And you're very active in fighting abortion and, more importantly, spreading the word of Christ. This purpose, how has all of this changed you in the last 3 years since becoming into the church? I mean, you're describing despair and now proactive action.
The change is utterly miraculous. I've been working with a number of priests and I work closely with one priest, actually in particular, Father Joseph McDermott, who now is at the Blessed Sacrament Parish in Walpole. Formerly, he was at the Immaculate Conception Church in Stoughton, and he attests that my conversion is absolutely miraculous. He stated when I began speaking with him, maybe about 4 years ago, in the midst of the tragedy of my marriage, he said I was, as quoting him, I was a basket case. And now he can see how it is that Mary has been leading me. And I've actually been led through so many doors of mercy now. My life I'm being repatterned, like it is that the scripture says, that you can put off the old and put on the new and become new. It's the truth. I never could have imagined that I could be filled more and more with a sense of purpose and holiness, that grace is, Jesus' grace is in our hearts, and that we can lift up our hearts to His holiness, just to know that we are His child, and that I was seeking the thread of God. I only was seeking the thread of God when I married, and I had thought I was marrying a very holy man, and he has a very serious addiction, and he's not willing to do the work or get the help. But it was through the tragedy of my being on my knees, being betrayed, and I was able to call out to God. And I learned when signing the application for my marriage license that my baptism date is May 13th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. I didn't know anything about that. I wasn't in the church at that time. Again, I was seeking that thread of God. And I was seeking a thread of God because actually at one point I heard a newscaster say that our country was hanging by a thread. And I thought, oh, that thread is the thread of God. But I was still in a state of despair in a lot of ways and looking for hope and healing. And this was before I was brought to the church. It was before I married. And I want to say more about this thread that I was seeking because my mother had sewed a lot of my dresses for me as a child. But what the mother pinned, when she pinned her daughter's hems, was to pin her identity. So I essentially was trying to claw my way out of this, what was an annihilation. And that's how the marriage was apocalyptically converged, and what it is that I was trying to claw my way out of. And that thread I have found has been threaded through the Rosary. That thread of God is threaded through the Rosary. And this is a rosary that was given to me at the Planned Parenthood in Boston last August when I went to pray there for the first time, because I knew that I would be speaking for the protest for Planned Parenthood on August 22nd. I gave my testimony in order to help protest Planned Parenthood. And so when I went to pray, a man who has a ministry for the unborn, Frank Porter, who makes these rosaries, he gave this to me. And here is pictured Our Lady of Guadalupe, who is the patroness of the unborn, and how it is that she appeared to St. Juan Diego in the 1500s. And her image is imprinted upon on his cloak. And so this all ties into this whole fabric of being and threads and image. My image was a sense of, I had no sense of myself in God's image.
And it's actually interesting because you, in your testimony and in what you've been saying, Victoria, you describe a person who's broken, a person who's lost, a person without confidence, a person who can't face life. And yet, you're here, there's 1,000 people here, most of whom you have never met. In fact, you only met me today. Yes. And yet yet you have the strength now to go up, to approach them, to go to complete strangers, offer your testimony, offer the prayer, offer the thread of Christ for them to grab. And that's an incredible transformation from despair to hope.
Absolutely. Again, it's been life-changing. It's been miraculous. The words in the Bible are no longer just words. They're living cultures. like a, oh, I'm sorry, now I'm faltering a little bit.
Well, that's
but,
that's all right. But, so it's like it's something that's come alive and it grows. But as I'm thinking about this, so you're here today. During the week, do you pray at other Planned Parenthoods? How do you spread this message outside of venues like this, or do you go to Catholic events and give this testimony and do this often?
Well, as I stated a few moments ago, I attended the protest for Planned Parenthood on August and was the speaker. I was able to put out how it is that I have my testimony to the director of the 40 Days for Life and to Representative Jim Lyons here in the State House in Boston, and he forwarded my testimony, so at least my testimony is on a link through Silent No More. And
so that's silentnomore.com, so people, you can Google, if you want to see that testimony given other than just the reading, you can go to that website and grab it, by the way.
Silent No More. And at the protest for Planned Parenthood on August 22nd, what is amazing is that August 22nd is the feast of the Queenship of Mary. And that's a testimony to how it is that there's a divine orchestration, how it is that Mary is so wants for us to see ourselves as children of God and to not be murdering the children, and because they've become like little Jesuses. Herod wanted to kill Jesus, and these babies, I was told by word of knowledge by a brother Henry from Uganda who has led me through a lot of this healing, and he said there's someone here who has been crying, and she has stopped crying, because when I was first married I was crying nearly every day for 2 years. 2 years, I'm not exaggerating. And he said, you have stopped crying. I knew he was speaking to me, but you're still crying in your heart. And he said, you've had children who have died before their time, but God sees them, and he has them. And that right then, that was about 2 years ago, I was released from any sense of guilt that I could not be forgiven. It's been a process. And if I may just say then, that Feast of Mary's Queenship then is a testimony to Mary as Queen, as our loving Mother of Mercy. And I had heard the words in my heart through this healing process, make me the Queen of Heaven. And that was before I was Catholic or knew anything about the Rosary. So those words came from her. And thank you.
And then one last thing I want to ask you. Now, again, you've talked about how you had guilt and now you have mercy. And of course, this is the year of mercy. What would you say, if there's one thing you could say to a young woman who's considering abortion or being pressured into abortion by either family or the father of the child or her friends, or a woman who has had an abortion, who thinks she cannot, who can't face it, or who is having trouble after it, what would you like to say to them?
I would say absolutely do not have an abortion. You will regret this the rest of your life. You may not think so, you may not know, you may feel desperate. Go to a pregnancy resource center. Go to Project Rachel. Reach out for some help, for people who can help give you some support. At the time in 1973, there was nothing, no pregnancy resources existed. I didn't have the help of even the school nurse from my high school. My mother and that school nurse helped lead me into that clinic. I didn't have any help. There's much more help now. There's stories like mine. Do whatever you can to just know that you can survive with your baby. You will regret it, and please just reach out for some help. You can find it through the internet, through the yellow pages, through a church.
And people will be shocked to find out how much help there is out there through the church and through faithful Catholic organizations and like that people just are not aware of to save their child. Well, Victoria, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your testimony. And thank you for stepping up, because by you stepping up and listening and putting out that thread of mercy, other people will catch it and be saved. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. Thank you.